Hello, and thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Megan Golden, and I'm co-director of Mission Cure, and I'm here today with Linda Martin, my co-director. And Linda and I want to thank you for attending. This is the third Mission Cure webinar for patients and their families on pancreatitis, and there are over 120 people registered. So just a few housekeeping items before we start. I need to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website early next week, as well as on our Facebook page. And for the participants, it is listen only. So we do welcome your questions, and you can type them anytime in the Q&A box, which you can find with the Q&A icon on your screen. And also, if you have any technical problems, please let us know via the chat or the Q&A. So we really appreciate your having joined us on a Saturday. We're trying out a Saturday time for these webinars because I know a lot of people work in other jobs or have other obligations during the week. And we do want to respect your time, so we plan to end the webinar in 45 minutes. So here is today's agenda. So first, Linda Martin will talk briefly about the current state of pancreatitis therapies, kind of what some of the challenges are. And then I will tell you about Mission Cure's strategy to find a cure, as well as how we plan to finance these efforts. And Linda and I will do a little tag teaming during this section. We'll then let you know how you can get involved to help find a cure. And finally, we'll open it up for questions. But as I said, please feel free to submit questions as we go along. So now let me.
So I can take it from here, Megan.
Great.
Great. Hello, everyone. And again, I add my thanks for joining us on a Saturday. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we plan to tell you a little bit about Mission Cure, as well as what's going on in the field of pancreatitis. Today's webinar, Curing Pancreatitis, It's Time for a New Approach, will focus on the heart of why Mission Cure was founded, what drives us every day, and why we're so optimistic that there will be a cure in less than 10 years. First, just a little about my background and how I happened to come to Mission Cure. At the end of 2017, I retired after a long career in the mobile telecom industry. I was a senior executive, and I led teams that designed, built, and operated some of the nation's largest cell phone networks and businesses. Tired of corporate bureaucracy and politics, in 1998, I co-founded a company to launch and develop independent cell phone companies in underserved, mostly rural communities that at that time had no cell phone service. During this time, my daughter was suffering from pancreatitis. And as a mom, I searched everywhere for treatments, for expertise and support. And I quickly became very frustrated by the lack of awareness and knowledge about this disease. My daughter was sick for many years, but was continually misdiagnosed or ignored, a situation that I found is sadly all too common. It turned out that my daughter probably had had pancreatitis for quite some time, as her pancreas was badly damaged and her disease was very advanced by the time she was finally correctly diagnosed with chronic pancreatitis. When I was a corporate leader, I was used to quickly identifying problems and unmet needs and pulling together my team of subject matter experts and finding or creating solutions. But when I looked at chronic pancreatitis, it seemed that no one was addressing this critical problem. I kept thinking, I must be missing something, but sadly I wasn't. Chronic pancreatitis was, for the most part, being ignored. It was time for a new approach, and I knew that I actually needed to help. Fortunately, I met Megan and her brother Eric, who had co-founded Mission Cure in 2017 with a mission to develop effective therapies for chronic and recurrent acute pancreatitis within 10 years. I joined Mission Cure to help build an organization focused on targeted, patient-driven, and efficient methods that would discover and deliver a cure. We have gotten tremendous support from the whole scientific community as we work toward a cure. We are especially grateful to the AbbVie Foundation, which provided the funding to make this webinar series possible. You know, if you or someone you love has chronic pancreatitis, you've probably had the experience of trying to explain the disease to your friends and family, probably even some doctors. You know that chronic pancreatitis is painful and debilitating, and you understand its costs. But you've also probably heard people say they've never heard of chronic pancreatitis, or they might not know it's a chronic disease, or that it affects children as well as adults. There is a logical reason for this lack of awareness. Chronic pancreatitis affects only about 150,000 people in the United States, or a very small fraction of the US population. And only about 1 million people have the disease globally, although the numbers are rising as the disease is being diagnosed more frequently. As a rare disease, it makes sense why so few people know about it. But conversely, chronic pancreatitis costs far more than its fair share based on the number of people who have it. In fact, we spend between $4 and $5 billion each year in the United States alone on chronic pancreatitis, and that number is growing. So why has there been so little progress for so long? First, our existing systems for drug development, as well as for research in healthcare, don't provide incentives, or in fact even measure, improved patient outcomes. No one makes money because patients feel better, and shareholders and executives are rewarded for profits. Also, many research institutions and drug development companies keep their knowledge and discoveries a secret. They've not been encouraged to share and collaborate, and these silos slow progress. Many of you have heard about the Valley of Death. This is when scientific discoveries in the lab never make it to market. They never get into the hands of patients because there just isn't enough funding to get through all the steps from lab to the clinic and then to patients. And also, there are very few, if any, incentives for drug companies to repurpose existing drugs, as there's not many financial gains to do so. Organizations like Cures Within Reach, who we work with, and Mission Cure are working to change this, as repurposing already approved drugs is the fastest and cheapest way to get a drug into the hands of patients. And Megan will talk more about this shortly. Finally, to date, there was no patient-centered organization to bring all stakeholders to the table to work together to solve these problems and improve patient outcomes in a specific and defined way. Now I'm going to turn it over to Megan to talk about how Mission Cure is changing these things and about our new approach for finding a cure for pancreatitis.
Thanks, Linda. So you see here the kind of 4 main pillars of Mission Cure's strategy, and they really address the very obstacles that Linda just went through on the last slide. One is active collaboration among stakeholders, and this includes patients and healthcare providers and payers and investors in a way that hasn't really happened before. A second is partnership with impact investors, and these are people, kind of a burgeoning group of people who want their money to make a positive impact on society in addition to providing financial returns. And third is financing based on patient outcomes, measurable improvement in patient outcomes, not just based on what makes the most money for the investors. And we'll go through that in a little bit. And then finally, cost-effective methods to cure disease. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So we spent much of our first year in existence figuring out what we can do to develop therapies that dramatically improve patient outcomes within 10 years. And we consulted a lot with patients, with clinicians, and many, many researchers, including the National Institutes for Health. And we developed a strategy through those discussions with 3 main components. And the idea here is that Mission Cure will invest in and coordinate a portfolio of projects that together will improve and lengthen the lives of people with pancreatitis. So you see the three broad pillars of the strategy here. One is to test promising already approved drugs using efficient trial designs. We'll talk about that in a minute. Second is to use a precision medicine approach to discover and develop new therapies. And then the third, which is a little different from the other two, but also extremely important, is to measure pain, digestive problems, and other outcomes in real time. So the first strategy is testing drugs that are approved for other diseases. And this is sometimes called drug repurposing. Mission Cure is working with the nonprofit Cures Within Reach, which specializes exclusively in repurposing approved drugs to cure new diseases. And so you may not know that many drugs that are already approved for one disease actually can have a positive impact or even cure other diseases. But right now, there just is not a financial incentive to test those already approved drugs for new things, because clinical trials can be expensive. And if the drug is generic, meaning not protected by patent anymore, then nobody's going to make a lot of money off of that. And if it is protected by patent, often the company that has the patent doesn't want to take the risk of doing a trial in a new population that might not work or might have some bad side effects. So, already approved drugs, because they've already been shown to be safe for people and approved by the FDA, can really go through the clinical trial process much more quickly and much less expensively than new drugs. So what we've done at Mission Cure is we analyzed research publications and consulted with pancreatic research experts around the world. And through that process, identified 58 already approved drugs that scientists believe could effectively treat chronic pancreatitis. You see some of the examples here, and that's just some of them. Most have been tested on mice with chronic pancreatitis with positive results. And as I said, they've all been found to be safe and approved by the FDA for other diseases. So there's nothing stopping someone from using them if they're prescribed by a doctor. But a lot of doctors might be reluctant to do that if it hasn't been proven for chronic pancreatitis. And really, to develop effective treatments, we need to test these drugs rigorously on people with pancreatitis to see if they work and who they work best for. So Mission Cure is now working with Aerial Precision Medicine, Johns Hopkins, and others to design studies of already approved treatments that are tailored to specific subgroups of pancreatitis sufferers. And in 2019, we hope to be able to launch some of those trials. So please stay tuned, because we are going to need trial participants. And then we're also working with data scientists using some cutting-edge data analysis platforms and artificial intelligence techniques to identify still more kind of promising already approved drugs, and also to prioritize which ones on our list to test first. So right now, there's a competition of data scientists called a Datathon going on to see who can use big data and machine learning to identify therapies for chronic pancreatitis. And it's sponsored by an alliance of pharmaceutical companies called the Pistoia Alliance, and Elsevier, which is really a medical publishing company that has a new data platform. And they chose Mission Cure and chronic pancreatitis as the subject of their competition. We were just on a webinar where they were talking about the work they had done so far, and it was very exciting. And we'll see what they come up with in the first quarter of 2019. Now, our second broad strategy to cure pancreatitis involves using a precision medicine approach to understand what's causing and contributing to pancreatitis and discover therapies that address the specific mechanisms that are leading to the disease. So if you were on our last webinar on genetics, you heard that with new gene sequencing techniques, we're gaining a much better understanding of pancreatitis. For decades, for the most part, medical professionals knew that gallstones or other obstructions could cause pancreatitis in a small subset of patients, but generally, they assumed that chronic pancreatitis was caused by alcohol, or if the person didn't drink, it was labeled idiopathic, meaning they didn't know what caused it. And then in 1996, Dr. David Whitcomb discovered a gene that caused hereditary pancreatitis, that's PRSS1. And so that became a new recognized cause for a very small number of families. But now researchers have discovered multiple genes that cause or contribute to pancreatitis, even in cases that are currently labeled alcoholic. And they're also learning how diet, drinking, smoking, and other diseases contribute. And they're beginning to realize that this is a complex disease, and efforts to treat or cure it need to address the specific genes and factors that are involved and that are causing it. And so I just want to quickly show a slide from Dr. Mark Haupt's presentation on our last webinar. And these are some, but not even all, of the genes that have been found to cause or contribute to pancreatitis. And as more people get genetic testing, we learn more about what's really causing it. So back to Mission Cure's second strategy, using a precision medicine approach to discover and develop new therapies. If we can identify specific genetic mutations that are causing a person's pancreas to function incorrectly, then scientists should be able to find ways to correct the problems. And once we find promising therapies, pharmaceutical companies will be interested in partnering to bring them to market, because there's a lot of interest now in taking rare diseases caused by genetic mutations and developing drugs for them. So advances in both medical and data science are creating new tools to identify and prioritize new drugs, and Mission Cure is investing in projects to do this. So Linda will now tell you about two of the projects that fit in this category.
Great, thanks, Megan. And before I move along here, I do want to take a minute. We've gotten a question that has come in, and I know we're going to address questions at the end, but I thought I would take a second to address this one that has come in, because we use the word cure here at Mission Cure quite liberally, I guess, and I wanted to sort of address how we think about cure. And so first of all, cure is sort of a continuum with steps along the way. We don't think we're going to go from the current state of pancreatitis to a vaccine, for example, that prevents it. We are working on numerous therapies, a whole portfolio of therapies that we hope will address various aspects of the disease. We understand that for many patients, impacting their symptoms is first and foremost on their mind. So we are certainly working with researchers and drug developers to help find therapies that may improve symptoms caused by the disease. These could be digestive issues and others such as pain, and some are more difficult to address than others. And as Megan just talked about, this disease is very complex, and each patient has a different set of symptoms and causes and progression. And so we're looking at the genetics as well as drug discovery and research to find mechanisms that may be able to either slow or stop progression of the disease and therefore impact symptoms as well. Of course, we do eventually intend to identify and prevent the disease and really get to a true definition of cure. But just to let you know that we understand that cure may mean different things to different people, and we're working on sort of all steps along the way. So thank you for that question, and now we will continue on and take the rest of the questions in a bit. I do want to tell you about our first project with a very exciting young company called Prolara. Prolara is a biotech public benefit company, also known as a B Corp, that works with families and patient advocacy organizations like Mission Cure, as well as with clinical partners, to discover cures for rare diseases and learn how genes work across diseases. Prolara creates disease models using simple organisms such as yeast, worms, and fruit flies that share genetic similarity with humans. This unique approach is extremely efficient as it allows screening of massive numbers of disease models and drug candidates much faster and cheaper than working with other traditional approaches. Working with Mission Cure, Prolara built models in yeast that they engineered 27 variations of the CFTR gene, the gene that was identified with cystic fibrosis way back in 1989. It is now known that some CFTR mutations cause or contribute to pancreatitis in both children and adults, perhaps combined with other factors. In phase 1 of our project, Prolara tested these 27 variants to see if any might respond. Phase 1 was a success in that we found at least one variant that did respond, and with that possibility, we advanced to phase 2 testing. In phase 2, which is going on right now, Prolara is testing the selected variant against its library of 20,000 novel chemical compounds. The results will serve as a starting point for further study and development. We are very excited to work with Prolara. CNBC called Ethan Perlstein, Prolara's founder and CEO, a biotech rebel for his innovative, out-of-the-box thinking. And Ethan and Prolara made the news again just a few weeks ago when billionaire Mark Cuban invested in the company for a second time. Stay tuned for our results from our partnership with Prolara in early 2019. Another project that we're currently negotiating the details on involves creating a Pancreas-on-a-Chip. This is a cutting-edge project with Cedars-Sinai in LA, where Stephen Pandol, a Mission Cure advisor and an international expert in pancreatitis, is working with a gentleman in this picture, Dr. Clive Svensson, who leads the Regenerative Medicine Institute at Cedars. Through a simple blood draw from someone with pancreatitis, Dr. Svensson will take the blood cells back in time to become stem cells, which then he can differentiate into pancreas cells. The idea is to create a model of pancreatitis using actual human cells with a particular genotype and put it on a chip. Then we can use this model to screen thousands of molecules to find one that fixes the defective mechanism. This process has already been done for islet cells in diabetes, but has not yet been tried for pancreatitis. And we're not sure if it will work, but it's groundbreaking research and it holds great promise. As we talked about earlier, pancreatitis is a disease that's very complex and has many interrelated factors, including a large list of potential genetic drivers. Each patient's disease is unique, and there is not likely to be a one-size-fits-all solution, as I just mentioned a few minutes ago. Mission Cure is in the early stages of helping to design small trials that are also known as N-of-1 trials to test potential precision medicine therapies with one or a few patients with specific disease characteristics. N-of-1 trials are a cutting-edge way to do clinical trials for rare diseases such as chronic pancreatitis that do not have large populations available. This is another way that Mission Cure is approaching the problem and using novel, effective ways to get solutions to patients more quickly. These are just a few examples of precision medicine-focused drug discovery. We're in discussions with several organizations and researchers to identify other promising candidates for our precision medicine drug discovery pipeline, and we will announce other partnerships as they develop. Now Megan will talk about our third strategy for finding a cure, tracking patient outcomes and symptoms.
Great. So our third broad strategy involves measuring pain, digestive problems, and other outcomes in real time. And there are two reasons for this. One is to help improve these symptoms. Traditionally, a disease's impact on someone's life is measured when someone participates in a research study and goes in for testing maybe every few weeks or every few months. But if you're really focused on improving outcomes, you need to understand how symptoms change hour to hour, what makes them worse, what makes them better. And if we can track that, we can learn more about what causes symptoms and how to improve them. So just to give you an example, many women with pancreatitis find that their symptoms get worse with their menstrual cycle. And that's something that's treatable. We know at least one doctor who asks about it in his visits with his patients and prescribes birth control pills that address it. There's a big movement now to use wearables like a Fitbit and cell phones to track symptoms in real time. And so we're looking to partner with some of those efforts. And so another example is this company Evidation, which recently launched a really large study and in conjunction with the Food and Drug Administration to measure patient data, behaviors, outcomes for people with chronic pain. And we're encouraging people with pancreatitis pain to participate because we really want our experience to be represented. And I'm actually participating as well, although I don't have pancreatitis myself. I think I'm probably in the control group. And so basically we're discussing this part of our strategy with researchers and helping to design studies to be able to quantify patient outcomes, which is an important element in our funding strategy. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So how much will all this cost and how are we going to finance it? We estimate right now that this portfolio of activities will require about $50 million in investment from Mission Cure. And to note, this is a lot of money, but it's far less than the $1 billion or more that you hear that it takes to develop a new drug. And this is because, as I hope the examples we gave show, we're not planning to fund the entire drug development process from soup to nuts. But instead to invest in projects where development can be done efficiently, like through the repurposing, or where our investment provides an added focus or incentive for an existing company or project. And then we plan to partner with pharmaceutical companies to complete development of the treatments that show promise. So the innovative financing method we plan to use to raise those funds is called pay for success financing, also sometimes called social impact bonds. It was first introduced in the UK in 2010 and has really gained traction around the world as a way of funding programs to address homelessness, early childhood education, and other social issues. And I was working on this type of financing for maternal and child health programs before founding Mission Cure. The idea behind it is that the government agencies responsible for a problem, and also those that are bearing the cost, allocate some of their funding to pay for improvements in outcomes. So applying this idea to pancreatitis, healthcare payers, who are now, as Linda said, spending $4 or $5 billion a year for chronic pancreatitis, not even acute pancreatitis, in the US alone, would pledge to pay a certain amount, let's say $60 million, over 10 years, if, with some interim payment points, if outcomes for a designated group of pancreatitis patients improve by a specified amount. And others besides the healthcare payers could serve as outcome payers as well. And investors who are interested in improving health invest in Mission Cure's investment vehicle, which in turn invests those funds in the portfolio of projects that we just described, that together will develop therapies that improve patients' lives. And Mission Cure manages the investments, first, in order to improve patient outcomes, and second, to obtain a financial return. If the outcomes are improved, the outcome payer pays the agreed upon payments, and the investor gets returns that are based on a combination of those outcome payments, the outcomes achieved for patients, and revenues from the market, from commercialization of therapies discovered. Disease foundations are increasingly investing in therapy development rather than just giving grants in what's called venture philanthropy. So there's really a path to follow there, and a lot has been learned about how you write those agreements. There are over 150 pay-for-success projects around the world, but this one's taking the idea a step further because it takes on a riskier enterprise. Drug development is a high-risk business, but it also combines returns from outcome payers and the market. So this is not just theoretical. I'm happy to report that we have identified a lead investor and are getting started on finding a cure right now. So stay tuned for more details on that in the new year. And now I've planned a lot of these projects in the early childhood area, and identifying outcomes that can be measured rigorously and practically is always a challenge. And they have to meet a lot of criteria because they have to work for the outcome payers and the patients, and there has to be data available, and they have to be scientifically rigorous. So we conducted a survey of pancreatitis patients to find out what outcomes are most important to them, and also consulted with researchers and financing experts. And this is the list of possible outcomes that we are considering now. Maybe I won't read through them for sake of time, but what we're doing is working on identifying accurate and rigorous ways of measuring these outcomes that are really practical. And you'll hear more from us on this in 2019. In 2019, we'll also engage with potential outcome payers to try to get a commitment. We've had initial conversations with a few potential payers, but we need, which includes some government like the Veterans Administration and Medicaid, and then some more like Kaiser Permanente. But we really need to raise more funding before we can devote the serious resources that are needed to get payers to commit to paying for outcomes. So just to wrap up, the reason I was drawn to this Pay for Success financing idea is that it gets people in need, government, investors, business people, to come together, identify specific improvements they want to see for real people, put in place programs to achieve those outcomes, and verify the impact with real data. And after diving into applying this concept to curing disease, I'm convinced that if we keep a laser focus on improving the lives of people with pancreatitis in measurable ways, that we can develop effective therapies within 10 years. And now I'll turn it back over to Linda to talk about how patients and families can help. And I'm hoping Linda is not having technical difficulties. Linda?
I am here. Thank you.
All right.
All right. We are working steadily toward putting innovative financing based on patient outcomes in place. But that's going to take a while, but we're not waiting. As Megan was just saying, we funded some first projects with initial investment, and we're actively seeking opportunities to work on finding new therapies. We have ambitious goals, but of course we can't do it alone. And if you're interested in working with us to find a cure, we really encourage you to get involved. There's a lot to do, so just let us know how you'd like to help. Here's just a few ideas to get you started. First of all, if you haven't already, sign up for our mailing list, follow us on social media, and please keep attending these webinars. We'd love it if you'd spread the word about Mission Cure every way possible. Share, tweet, blog, shout it out. Help us debunk the myths about pancreatitis and get the truth out. Talk about your disease and the truth about life with pancreatitis. Nothing helps people understand the disease better than hearing from people who are experiencing it. And if you could participate in patient surveys and meetings with researchers and government and drug developers, we'd love it, and we'll ask you for your help when the time is right. If you can create a personal fundraising campaign, a lot of people are starting to do that. We had a great successful Giving Tuesday, and looking for more efforts in this regard. So if you can help in personal fundraising or helping us find investors and contributors, that would be a great way to help us move forward. Help us get the word out by sharing this link when it becomes available, and just share on all the social media channels that you participate in. That would be great. So now it's time for questions. We really want your ideas and your questions. With us today also is one of our colleagues, Gabrielle Gill, who will take your questions and read them, and then we will take turns answering them. So please, if you haven't logged your question, please do so now. And if we don't get to all of them, we will follow up right after the webinar.
All right, so we have one question already, asking how do we as patients find out about the clinical trials you guys have talked about or get involved in that way?
Linda, do you want to take that one?
Oh, I can take that one, sure. Okay, well, there are a couple of ways. There certainly is a website, clinicaltrials.gov, but Mission Cure is following the clinical trials related to pancreatitis very closely. There are 2 going on at the moment, and if you want more information about those, contact us. But we are, in fact, working with the researchers and will publish on our website any new clinical trials that come up, as well as the qualifications so you can see if it's applicable to you. So just check back with our website.
And just the 2 current trials, one is for Camostat, that's ongoing for chronic pancreatitis, and then there's another one for recurrent acute pancreatitis out of California, I believe.
All right. So kind of on that note, we have another patient who's asking if they would be able to email us for more information on these trials, or specifically the ones that you guys just mentioned.
Absolutely.
Yeah, info@missioncure.org would be a great way to reach us, or either Megan or my individual email is fine as well.
All right.
While we're waiting to see if there are more questions, why don't we tell you about our next webinar?
Right. Well, we hope you can join us for our next webinar. It will be on January 10th at 2:00 Eastern. And it is called, Should You Have Your Blank Blank Pancreas Removed? Our guest presenter will be Dr. Milena Bellin, the leading endocrinologist with the University of Minnesota's TPIAT team and one of the world's leading researchers on islet transplantation during TPIAT surgery. The webinar will also include experiences from the patients, and we know that TPIAT is it's a serious and major decision, and we hope that you can join us and get the facts from both the clinical and patient perspective. And registration is open now. You can see the link here at the bottom of the screen. So please join us in January.
Are there more questions, Gabby?
Yeah, so we have one more asking if someone is a mom, a relative, a caregiver, can they participate in the surveys and our different initiatives? How can they do that?
Yes, definitely. You'll be able to tell on the surveys. Generally, we will ask for your role, so please identify if you're a caregiver or parent, etc., or the patient, and answer on perspective, your perspective, and in some cases you'll be able to see that it's specifically about the patient, but feel free to answer on behalf of the patient if you are a parent or caregiver. And we appreciate the question, and we appreciate your participation. Speaking of participation, I want to mention that immediately at the end of this webinar, there will be a really brief survey that will pop up, and we would love it if you would just take an extra minute, it's very short, to fill it out. It really helps us know what's important to you and how we're doing, and allow us to continue to get funding to hold these webinar series. So if you would just take a minute, it would be very much appreciated. And I think
we have one more question.
Okay.
someone from India is asking how Mission Cure kind of relates to the international community and how more broadly it's applicable to the international folks.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that question. And one of the positive things about being in the kind of therapy development business is that, precision medicine, taking into account precision medicine, if you find something that effectively treats chronic pancreatitis in the US, it will treat it generally for the same type of people elsewhere as well. So really, the therapies can benefit everybody. I know in India, actually, chronic pancreatitis is a huge problem. Obviously, there are more people affected because of the size of the population, but it's also a higher proportion. And we are working closely with researchers in India, especially Dr. Pramod Garg, who is one of the leading researchers and I think the head of the International Association of Pancreatology, on our strategy in general, on specific projects, and even potentially on clinical trials. There is a solicitation for some funding right now from Cures Within Reach to fund repurposing trials, so already approved drugs in developing countries. And we're actually looking with some partners in India about the possibility of their applying for chronic pancreatitis. I do think most of the audience for this webinar is in the US, and so we're open to suggestions about how to best engage the patient community in India. We also have some partners in the UK. And
I can see, thanks Megan. I can see that we're past our stop time, but we did start a few minutes late just to make sure everyone who was joining had time to join. I want to point out here on the last slide how you can reach us with any additional questions, and the questions that we haven't gotten to here today yet. Thank you for submitting them, and we will follow up shortly after the webinar. And I want to thank you so much for participating in today's Mission Cure webinar. Have a great weekend. And from all of us at Mission Cure, we wish you and your families a very happy and healthy holiday season. Thank you so much for joining.